and welcome to your award-winning The Reasons I'm Broke podcast, bringing you the reasons we're broke every single week through news and headlines ranging from comics, movies, TV, video games, and more. I'm Daniel, and joining you as the co-host this week is Matt. Welcome back, Matt.
Good to be back. Thanks for having me.
Per usual, Matt shows up on a heavy Warner Brothers Snyderverse, although that happens, it seems to be like every week.
I mean,
right now.
Every week is heavy. It's funny, we made a joke in our chat about it, and like, well, here we are.
That's right. Let's see if Mastradamus, if anything came true this week. But if this is your very first episode, the way we format the show is we go through a block of news, and then we finish it off with the Broket block, which is the more personal side of the show, what Matt and I have been doing since you last heard us. So let's jump right in and explore sector number 523. So this was a pretty big move in the online TCG market, especially heard it on my end since I do work at a card shop now. eBay is acquiring TCG Player, which is one of the largest trading card marketplaces, for $295 million. So if you are unfamiliar, TCG Player is popular for buying and selling trading card games like Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and Magic the Gathering. CEO of TCG Player, Chetty Hampson, said, quote, "This new chapter allows us to continue operating independently within eBay while also benefiting from their decades of industry experience and resources to deepen the connection between hobbyists and their communities," end quote. So back in May, eBay did expand its authenticity guarantee to include graded cards worth over $2,000 and said it would partner up with Professional Sports Authenticator, which is a third-party company who inspects and grades cards. And then back in June, the company launched the eBay Vault, which is a 31,000 square foot temperature-controlled facility where buyers and sellers can store their graded cards. So they're going heavy on the TCG market specifically, and TCG Player being one of the biggest TCG sellers out there right next to eBay now. Some people are a little worried about this being another monopoly in the world of post-COVID.
Yeah, cards seem to be just be getting hotter and hotter, especially in like the post-pandemic world. Like, while I'm not a card collector, I feel like I hear you talking with the other co-hosts like more and more frequently about moves and things that are happening in the card world. That you've got multiple graders now, and you've got, obviously, eBay is not making an insignificant investment into that market. I'm actually kind of surprised that they hadn't already bought or had their own grading service like that.
Especially with, as you mentioned, the seller's market getting so big. And I think it's pretty clear now that TCG gaming, trading, selling is not just a spike in the market over people being in lockdown and getting back into digging up their old cards. I think it is here to stay, and it is a market that people are making a living off of. I'm personally happy as an eBay investor with this move, even though it does conflict pretty heavily with the place I work at, because this makes TCG Player was our biggest competitor right under eBay. And now eBay is going to be the big dog in TCG collecting. According to Exhibitor Relations, we just had the largest opening as far as this week, and then now they're saying anime in North America, but the new Dragon Ball Superheroes movie grossed a solid $20 million domestically on its opening weekend. So with nearly 4,000 screens showing the movie, it had the largest release of an anime movie stateside to date. So this is even larger than Pokemon and the recent Demon Slayer movie, as far as the US is concerned.
Dragon Ball doesn't seem to be running out of fuel, man. Anytime I'm thinking that, Dragon Ball's still around, and another like big thing comes out, and like, I don't mean to say that derogatorily to anyone who is a Dragon Ball fan. It's just one of those things that I tried getting into. I've had friends that are into it. I've given a couple of shots, and it just never like stuck with me. But for fans of Dragon Ball, good on you guys. More success like this will increase competition, and will actually, could lead to, Warner Brothers and Disney like taking competition seriously, because like even though $20 million is a respectable opening, it's not something that's going to make them like alter their business plan any. But I would love to see them like be put on their heels, and that's anime seems to be finally, at least theatrically, given some decent competition.
And that's one of the things that one of my coworkers brought up, Sam, that back when the Demon Slayer movie broke the record from Miyazaki's, I want to say Spirited Away, as far as largest anime movie in Japan. And they asked him, what do you think about that, Demon Slayer breaking your record? And he was like, I think it's great for the industry and it's great for anime. And now that there's better technology and better animation, we're going to be seeing more of that. Like kind of people don't expect that when a filmmaker, especially these days, they might say something about the state of the industry, especially if it's a movie that for the last 20 years or whatever had the record, and then they'll say something about the changing landscape. But instead, it's as you said, stuff like Dragon Ball Super, stuff like Demon Slayer, it's great that it does as well as it does, because it could introduce a whole new genre that you and I could be talking about in 10 years of being the big movie thing, being the new, like right now, superhero movies are the action movies of today. Who knows? Maybe anime is going to be the next bigger thing. I did see Dragon Ball Superhero, and I hope to do a full review with Millennial Mike and Maceo sometime in the future if they get around to seeing it on the big screen. And right now I'm trying to work out a time with Paul Pichelli and I where we can watch the Broly movie and do a proper review of it on here as well. So lots of Dragon Ball Super coming your way, hopefully in future episodes here. But also on the big screen is more video game films, as this was unexpected, but I guess Sega is kind of looking in their bin and seeing what else they own. Sega is developing movies for Comix Zone and Space Channel 5 after the success of Sonic the Hedgehog 2. So Space Channel 5's adaptation has been described as a, quote, comedy dance adaptation, end quote, that follows a fast food worker that is recruited by a reporter from the future. And then the Comix Zone adaptation will be written by Young Justice writer May Cat, and it sees a jaded comic book creator get sucked into the final issue of his series with, quote, a young queer writer of color, end quote. The two will have to work together to defeat a supervillain and learn about the art of storytelling. Previously, Sega did announce a live-action adaptation for Yakuza, which so far there's been no recent movement on that project. But these two, I'm a little apprehensive about these because it's not Sonic the Hedgehog. I think it's going to be harder to try to get people into Comix Zone or Space Channel 5, even though they have their little fan bases.
I read through the notes, and hearing you say them out loud, those high concepts don't really quite roll off the tongue, do they?
No.
they seem crafted to like try to check a certain number of boxes.
Yes.
Them being like lesser known properties, like I remember the advertisements for Comix Zone. I remember thinking it was an app for like a database app for cataloging your comic book collection, but with lesser recognition and less popularity might give them a lot more room for reinvention. I don't think there's going to be too many, uber fans of Space Channel 5 or the Comix Zone who are going to be upset about that.
They're ruining my childhood, all five people said.
They're ruining this advertisement I saw on the back of a Action Comics back in 1992.
And I played Comix Zone. I did as a kid, and I never beat it. It was a difficult game. Had some great little movements and panels when you went from stage to stage. Like literally the screen would scroll like Mario style, but it would be the character jumping from one panel to the next, which was awesome. And I love the graphics, but it's not something that I'm also like, they better keep it, like you were saying, better keep it loyal to the original game. I'm just saying they better keep the budget relatively low on these two, because they're not Sonic. Sonic sells itself. It has a whole generation. Kids like the characters. They see the blue hedgehog. My son, Leo, sees it and he's like, oh, that's a cool character. Who is that? Immediately when he saw him. I'm like, well, that's Sonic the Hedgehog. Let me show you some stuff. Not going to get the same reaction when he sees the Lula or whatever her name is from Space Channel 5. Maybe in 10 years he will as he enters puberty, but not now. And then Comix Zone, even less. It's a bulky guy with a ponytail and dark sunglasses that are rounded. It doesn't speak to the kids like Sonic.
Yeah, that character's design is the epitome of the 90s edgelord before they were before edgelord was a term.
Absolutely true. Absolutely. You could almost see the guy working at a comic shop. Like that's the 90s guy right there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Best of luck, though, if Sega can turn this into a profit by using some of that Sonic money. But I'm just saying I would have focused on Sonic 3, maybe Yakuza, because you can do something for the adults there. But best of luck. And who knows, maybe these won't take off at the end of the day. We'll cover that as more happens.
Earthworm Jim. Is that Sega?
That's a great question. It was always on the Genesis. I don't know who owns it. I feel like you're right. It would be. I don't think we ever saw Earthworm Jim on the Super Nintendo, did we?
I don't know. But I mean, if it's Sega, why don't we jump on that? Bring back Earthworm Jim.
Yeah. Or we talked on the show, I forgot who I mentioned it with, but Virtual Fighter, they've got other properties they can also use. Super Monkey Ball, I feel like would have been an easier sell than some of these other ones. Just cute monkeys running around, make it CGI, and you're done.
Right.
But from here on out, we run into some comic news and some controversy a little bit as some of these comics are brought back. But in this case, Diamond Distributors, so for anyone not familiar with Diamond, they are the ones who get a lot of your comic books to your comic shop. They're one of the distributors that get some of these indie books at least to your shop. And they filed a lawsuit against GameStop due to a refusal to uphold contractual obligations, and they're seeking a grand total of $2.8 million. So according to Bleeding Cool, this has to do with contractual disputes over when GameStop is and is not allowed to cancel orders. So this included a list of 87 previously submitted and accepted purchase orders with a total contract price of an excess of $950,000. So GameStop tried to cancel out some of their orders, and I get it, Diamond is probably like, hey, we just ordered all these from these distributors, from these manufacturers, and now you're trying to, we can't unload these. GameStop ordered huge with Diamond. Anytime, I don't know if you've been to a GameStop lately, but for a while there, they had a lot of gallery statues, toys, a bunch of little knickknacks that you can get from Diamond, and that's a pretty big deal. That'd be a pretty big hit for Diamond, especially in 2022.
Yeah, even when back in the day when I had my own shop, you had to be very careful with ordering, because while stuff was on the catalog, it doesn't necessarily mean it was coming out then, but you were committing to that, and it was only after something was like grossly past its expected shipping date could you actually get your money back for it. So when it came to like ordering figures, statues, more premium, it's not just like weekly comic books. We had to be a lot more careful with that. But I think this is a lot of, Diamond's lost a lot of customers lately. Their biggest customers being DC, and like, didn't Marvel leave them too?
They did, absolutely.
And so like that's your number one and number two comic book publishers that took their business elsewhere. So Diamond now has to keep an eye on the books. Capiche?
Oh yeah. Yeah, Steve Jeppy. Yeah. He's gonna send some guys to break some knees over at GameStop over there.
It would be a shame if I strapped these concrete filled Xboxes to your feet and toss you in the river, see?
And yeah, to anyone also with Marvel, I get it, they didn't completely leave Diamond, but they might as well have, because the fees are ridiculous on Diamond's part now to try to buy Marvel books to send to comic shops. If comic shops go straight to Marvel's new distributor, which I forget who it was, it might be Simon & Schuster, they get a better discount through them. So a lot of comic shops are just ordering through Simon & Schuster instead. So it is still a huge loss from Diamond. And GameStop is struggling too. So these are two companies that are not doing great, that are having rough years. And you bet that they're probably going to be trying to fight both sides of like, no, we want to cancel. Well, here in the contract it says you can't, and you did. So now we're suing you because you're not paying us our order money. And I think Diamond's going to come out on top on this one, especially if it's specifically in that contract. We've got the return of the death of Superman as the 30th anniversary is being celebrated. And it is being brought back with the infamous black poly bags. And this time it does have one of the many variant covers is being offered with a black armband and the logo for the Death of Superman 30th Anniversary Special on it. It is currently set to go on sale November 8th. FOCs just passed this weekend over final order cutoffs. So you may be limited at your comic shop on how many copies you can get of this. I don't know how many people are looking for this, but I'll tell you what, I am buying a copy simply because they brought back the or some of the original writers and artists that worked on that original issue to tell that same event from different character perspectives, like Dan Jurgens. And I like Dan Jurgens. I want to support him, so I will be picking up a copy.
Have we learned nothing in 30 years? Polybags? Come on, man.
They had to, though. They had to.
I mean, you can release an anniversary issue without polybagging it, though. It's like, it's a waste. For those who didn't read comics in the 90s, grew up like after that, started collecting comics in the early 2000s, the Death of Superman issue was like the peak of the 90s boom, and it crashed immediately after this issue came out because, the Death of Superman was like the biggest storyline of like forever. And there were 6 million copies of it out in the wild. Everyone bought it in multiple copies. So we're trying to sell it for $75 a copy. And yeah, some people were able to sell it, but then everyone realized, oh wait, there's 6 million copies out there of this, and they're just going to bring Superman back. Whoever thought he was permanently going to be dead forever. It wasn't even the first time they actually killed Superman. It's just the first time they made a big event out of it. So like the polybag to me is like, it's very triggering because it's every other comic in the 90s was polybagged with something in there, a card, supplemental material, and it's just all garbage just sitting in a landfill. They could have just and they probably should have just released like a printed cover with that logo on there and like a little 30th anniversary Chiron on there. And that would have done the same thing. Like, I'm ecstatic that like a lot of the original talent from that storyline was brought back, especially Dan Jurgens. Like the man is nothing if not consistent and like a stalwart of Superman creatives. So I'm glad that a lot of those people are back for this issue. I just hate the gimmick of the polybag and the black armband, which I think I might still have.
If you have your copy pre-ordered, just know that the polybag version is a variant. And if you just told your comic shop, hey, I want that one shot, there by default cover A will not be polybagged. So just to make that clear for anyone, if you're expecting that polybag in your box, make sure to contact your comic shop. If you don't want the polybag, then you're good, because you have to specifically request that variant. And they're also doing like a special hardcover edition, which has some extra content in there. I didn't go for that one because, as you mentioned, the Death of Superman event, while it is iconic in the world of comics, for me, it doesn't hold a special place in my heart. I did not go into my comic shop back then. I was collecting Captain America. I was collecting Sonic the Hedgehog. There was nothing Superman in my collection in those days. And in this case, but I have read the issue before, and I know it was a mess trying to collect the different tie-ins, and I've gone through the last couple of years where when I got hired at the comic shop, this book, if you had it in your back issue bins, would go for $5. Now there's enough interest in it where the last time we had it, I think we put $30 on it, which is a big deal for a book that there's millions of copies of out there. I remember
well, not anymore. They're all in the trash. They're a lot, I'd say a good 3/4 of them are probably in a landfill or a dollar bin in the Midwest.
Well, there you go. As less and less of them exist, then those existing copies are going to be eventually maybe it'll hit the $75 mark again.
By the time you retire, you could buy a tank of gas with one of them.
And that was one of the things that I would constantly have customers come in like, hey, I have that Death of Superman book. What's that going for? And it always made me feel great to be like, $10. It's going for $10.
Yeah. Always tell the speculators buy that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The ones that felt like they were going to retire off of Death of Superman. It's like, no, even for inflation, you're probably maybe getting your money back at best.
Probably.
Fans of Young Justice. So this is where we get into the heated stuff I've gotten into arguments with my coworkers about, Twitter. It's Warner Brothers and the cancellations that we've been talking about here on the podcast for the last couple of weeks. And let's talk about Young Justice first. As a new report from TV Line, looks like the 5th season of Young Justice has not yet been ordered by Warner Brothers Discovery. There was a quote here from one of the showrunners who said, HBO Max from Go had only ordered a single season of the one-time Cartoon Network and DC Universe series, and that plan has not changed. There are currently no plans for a season 5, I am told, end quote. So that's basically nothing has changed from since they got greenlit on season 4. And I think it's pretty much obvious that they don't plan on, at the moment, invest in projects that aren't bringing in subscribers to a service that they're going to kill next summer anyway. Right now, all 4 seasons are available on HBO Max if you want to watch every single season. But honestly, I don't expect a season 5 out of this one. And we're lucky we got a season 3 and 4.
DC starting their own platform that Mastradamus predicted was going to get folded into HBO Max. It was great that they brought that back. I really enjoyed the first 2 seasons. The season that was on the DC app and then DC Universe and then got folded in HBO Max and then the follow-up season, I admire the creatives kind of like swinging for the fences and trying to tell like a long-form story over the course of the season. Didn't do it as well as still the high bar for me is Justice League Unlimited. Like they were great in having like self-contained episodes, and the things that I didn't like about the last couple seasons were they had so many storylines, and it would take like, you have maybe like 12 different storylines that by the mid-season you'd have down to maybe 8, but still over a 20, 30-minute episode, you had like 3 different storylines going on, and over the course of like 6, 7 episodes, maybe one of those would be completed, pushing on to the next one. But they were all kind of feeding into like the last couple of episodes, and it takes a lot of skill to kind of wrap them all together. And they did it. I'm going to say they pulled it off technically, but it was also kind of like, I felt like it was a lot of work watching the last couple of seasons. Like it felt very slow, and I wanted a little bit snappier pace. Still very well put together, but the last season they kind of ended it on a good note. They seemed like they were planning on wrapping things up, leaving things in kind of a happy place with, you know, a little bit of a crumb future season, but it seemed like they knew the writing was on the wall, and that every season they've had, like the last 2 seasons, like we don't know if we're going to get another season. And if they don't, I would love to see more, but I would love to see them change some things if they bring it back. And if they don't, I'm not sad. I feel like we got 2 more seasons out of there that we never thought we would get.
And I'm sure they're looking at the numbers for season 5. They have access to that, and that probably tells a lot. I know Kelly was a strong supporter of let's bring back the show and let's do more seasons, but even she hasn't seen the latest season. So I think they probably have less viewers than ever when it comes to Young Justice as far as the latest season. And from there, they'll make their decisions and probably try to put their money and invest that into something else, which I hear even season 5, it took a huge step in the animation department. So I'm sure even then they got a budget cut and said, hey, work with this, kind of like they did with The Legend of Korra with Avatar. That took a huge nosedive when it came to animation over the last couple seasons over at Nickelodeon.
But you know what? Take that smaller budget and just make fewer episodes and pour that budget into a fewer episodes with a tighter storyline. Don't make something that's sprawling. Then maybe you get some more people back, you get more eyeballs on it, and you regrow, the brand. Like you don't have to have like the last 2 seasons, I believe, were like, somewhere between 22 and 26 episodes. Wow. And it felt longer than that. They just kind of spaced things out so far though that it felt like you'd have like 13 episodes drop, like a 2-3 month break, and then another 13 episodes would drop like week to week, which I like that they weren't all just dropped at once. But again, I felt like the last 2 seasons were just too long.
For this next bit of news, there's been a lot of misreporting or people just looking at the headlines. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's been a lot of negative slants from Bleeding Cool, Comic Book, IGN on almost anything that Warner Brothers Discovery has been doing as far as DC and these changes. So one of them was Batman the Caped Crusader canceled by HBO Max, and no one reads the actual article. And unfortunately, the headline makes it so that it's a terrible thing. They got rid of it. Death threats to fucking David Zaslav, which is insane to me. But just to be clear, Batman Caped Crusader, Merry Little Batman, The Day the Earth Flew Up, a Looney Tunes movie, Bye Bye Bunny, a Looney Tunes musical, Did I Do That to the Holidays, a Steve Urkel story, and The Amazing World of Gumball are no longer going to be at HBO Max, but according to TV Line, they will continue production with the hope of being shopped to new homes. So we are still getting these, but the people at Warner Brothers Discovery are instead, because there's no HBO Max next summer, they're getting money for these releases and getting that from who knows who picks these up? Netflix, Hulu, we don't know, but they are instead going to be paid to stream these productions.
Yeah, it's weird that you're taking this content. You're not outright canceling it, but you're giving it a chance to go to basically your competitors. Because while HBO Max is going to go away in a form, just like the DC Universe service got folded into HBO Max, HBO Max will be folded into some new hybrid thing with Discovery Plus. So you're basically giving content to competitors. And if we've learned anything from when Disney bought, Marvel and Lucasfilm, that they've been playing a long game of, like, over the last 10 years, just slowly as the rights expire, you've got to wait for this content to come back to you that other people had pre-existing contracts for and rights to stream. And, like, what if any of these other properties are like the next big thing, and you've given that opportunity competitor, and it's going to cost you more money to get it back. But I understand Zaslav's move right now of, like, well, he needs savings now because when they, bought Warner Brothers, the Warner Media, they've got $55 billion in debt that they have to write down somehow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that Emmerich and Hamada. Like, this is not. I've seen the tweets of, like, they're in debt because they keep canceling these things. Maybe if they hadn't fired so many animators, this wouldn't have. All of that shit was already there. This is stuff they inherited. Like, Zaslav is just trying to stop the bleeding. But I get you on the worry on getting these and sending them off to some other companies. But I'm guessing in the world of 2022, they'd be smart enough to say, okay, you can have Batman Caped Crusader and you get that for 1 year. And then we get that back. So what are you paying us for that 1 year exclusive? Great. And then maybe by the time that year expires, if they feel that the new Warner Brothers Discovery streaming service is robust enough, they can then take these same products and shows and debut them on that service, make them exclusive. Kind of like how Peacock took back The Office after the contract expired and instead went, no, we're not renewing. We'll put it on Peacock instead. Yeah,
which I would say Peacock is the worst streaming service out there.
Is it really?
I tried it, but, like, you gotta, they really play fast and loose with what the word premium means. Cause, like, my wife and I had it, and the word premium, you're not thinking that it's going to come with ads, right?
Right.
No, it does come with ads. You have to, it's still not clear which tier of theirs is completely ad free. Like, it seems like there's no service or no tiering platform for them that is 100% ad free. And the premium part of it is, like, say, we're big fans of Parks and Rec. We're theming our big wedding, after Parks and Rec. If you just have the Peacock free service, you can only watch, like, the first 2 seasons of it. And then if you want the rest, you get premium, but it's still going to have ads. It's going to have a lot of ads.
This is why I can barely do some Paramount Plus, because it's like, oh, great, that show's on Paramount Plus. Let me watch Bar Rescue. And it's loaded with fucking ads, and it sucks. I know what you mean, man.
So we got a friend of ours let us, or gave us their login to try out Paramount Plus a little bit more than we had before. And so I finally watched a couple episodes of Halo. I'm like, I want to love Halo. I really do. Mm-hmm. But it's not good enough for me to put up with all these ads.
And that's one of the things where we also have a login for Paramount Plus, and I almost want to be like, let me give you the difference for the no ads, because it does suck just having a break. And we grew up with commercials, but we're now spoiled. There's very few shows that are worth that commercial break. I think Kelly and I happily sit through Hell's Kitchen on Hulu for the 1.5-minute ads, because you get a lot of content in that hour. But for 30-minute shows, and Halo is not one of them, but 30-minute shows, it's just not worth it.
No.
We have more Batgirl controversy still. All these people pretending that this Batgirl movie was so important. After the Batgirl film was canceled, filmmakers Bilal Falal and Adil El Arbi tried to download the film from HBO Max servers. And in a recent TikTok by Falal, translated by the direct, they said, quote, Adil called me and told me, go ahead, shoot everything on your phone. I went on the server. Everything was gone. We were like, fucking shit. We did not even keep the scenes with Batman in it. We were right in the middle of editing. There was a lot of work to get done, so it was not like the movie was finished, end quote. And according to The Hollywood Reporter, a select few got the opportunity to see Batgirl with secret, quote, funeral screenings, end quote, of the film being held at the Warner Brothers lot. The screenings were held by cast and crew, as well as representatives and executives. So right now, a lot of people are saying someone should be recording that movie and releasing it and leaking it and all that stuff. And I'm just like, all right.
Great, so we can see a low-quality version of a film that wasn't done.
Was not done, and I'm seeing people like, well, they're going to eventually release it, I'm sure. And it's like, it's a tax write-off. They can't.
Yeah, they legally can't. You know, I wanted to see it, but I was fully expecting something that was going to be, it was made for streaming. I wasn't expecting something that was supposed to go to the screens, but I wanted to see it mostly for, you know, Michael Keaton's Batman, how they were going to fold into it. And after seeing, like, he's only going to be in like 5 scenes, he's barely in the movie, and that's fine. But like, I feel bad for the directors who, you know, they took an opportunity that, you know, they were in the Marvel studio, they were given an opportunity. Kevin Feige encouraged them to, you know, to take the opportunity, and that opportunity ended up being a tax write-off for Warner Brothers. So like, from a creator's perspective, I feel for them, because like they have nothing other than a few stills to like really show anyone of what they did. They were compensated for it, and you know, it's good. But like, when you're in Hollywood, in movies, you're constantly like, you know, working to, you know, fire yourself once the job is done, and then you have to go find another job. You know, like having a whole like year where you can't show anyone of what you did with that year, other than like, hey, my film was canceled. Like, it's going to leave a bad taste in other producers' mouths. I think they'll end up back on their feet, you know, back work on another series with, you know, with Marvel. I just feel bad that they have nothing. Like, Zach, you know, was able to get his stuff before that, and he was able to kind of like leak things out. And so I don't think if he'd been able to get some of it, you know, had been able to get some of it out of his stuff, or download most of what he had, I don't think we would have gotten the Snyder cut.
Right.
So do I think this is on that same level of, oh, we're missing out on something so big and special? No, but at the same time, like, we've got, you know, some creators here that were basically just, you know, unceremoniously, you know, dumped off of their work.
Yeah, and there are different circumstances between this project and the Snyder Cut, as you mentioned. Zach was called a criminal back when he was leaking these things for taking. It's like, no, move on. He should be apprehended because he's stealing these things. Meanwhile, now they're encouraging this director's like, you guys should leak the movie, try to film it. It's just funny, the double standard. But it does sound like the directors are in a better headspace about it, because they have since said that they're open to work with Warner Brothers and DC again. So they're not burning that bridge, unlike that one actor that had that anonymous report last week of calling David Zaslav an imbecile for canceling the movie. And it seems like they're going to be fine with Marvel. They're going to get work there. They're open to work with Warner Brothers again in the future. Do you think that having the funeral screenings on Warner Brothers lot, do you think that this helped provide some closure, at least for some of the crew members and maybe for the directors themselves?
Yeah, I think it's going to hurt more.
Really? So you think it was a bad move to do it?
I mean, it's kind of like a small olive branch to extend to allow people, but at the same time, it's like they'll never be able to see it again. You know, maybe someday in the far future, but like, you know, it'd be like, you know, if I created something and someone, you know, said, nope, no one is ever going to see this, but hey, we're going to give you one last chance to see it, to say goodbye. I mean, like, there's a reason why it's a funeral screening. It's not a happy occasion. It's a sad occasion. You're giving people a chance to mourn. Yes. But I mean, it's still a creative vision unfulfilled. If I were a creator, it would just kind of gnaw at me for a long, long time.
I guess I look at it a little bit differently, more of, hey, bring your friends and family type of thing, because the crew and cast that you were so close with, and let's celebrate this movie at least that wasn't able to come out. I don't know. And I guess we weren't there. I'd love to be a fly on the wall for that screening, just to see how they all took it and celebrated or didn't celebrate. I don't know. But that's that for Batgirl. And I hope that that's kind of the end. I don't know. Maybe we'll get something else next week of something else happening, but I'm kind of over the Batgirl stories that are popping up here and there. We did get Jesse Eisenberg, who had an interview with Deadline. He revealed that he'd be shocked if he got to play Lex Luthor again, but that, quote, it'd be a pleasant shock, end quote. So at the 28th Sarajevo Film Festival, he went on to discuss the backlash he received upon the film's release. He said, quote, I felt very personal about it. The writer, Chris Terrio, is a very serious writer, and he's a very emotional person. He thought a lot about my character, and I thought a lot about my character too. I talked with my acting coach about the character a lot, about his backstory with his father and his emotional life, and then people hate me, end quote. So it sounds like he's open to playing the role, but yeah, there was a pretty big backlash, even now still, over his Lex Luthor.
My initial reaction to Eisenberg's Luthor wasn't the most favorable. Like, I didn't like it at first. The 3-hour cut of BVS did flesh him out a little bit more. Once I was able to, like, I kind of like, for the Lex Luthor clone storyline, of the son of Lex Luthor storyline that ran through the Superman comics, like back in the 90s, which, ended up, he ended up being someone who was, originally introduced as someone who was not like Lex Luthor. He was very, well, first of all, he had all his hair, and he was a lot more philanthropic. He tried being, friends with Superman, and it turned out later that he was actually a clone. Lex Luthor pulled another one off. But once I looked at him as kind of like, well, the Luthor we're seeing is his son, is the son of, like the classic prototypical businessman Luthor that we know. Right. So once I thought of him as like, okay, the Luthor we want is dead. Mm-hmm. That was the Luthor, the original one. What we're getting is now his son. So it gives him a little bit more freedom, a little bit more invention. And I saw it kind of like, how George W. Bush kind of like launched us into Iraq, trying to one up his dad. And that's I kind of looked at Eisenberg's Luthor as just trying to one up, his father. And that I looked at it a different way. I enjoyed it looking at his Luthor through that lens, rather than like, oh, this is what we think. It's not the traditional Luthor, and that's what we expected.
And I think in the film they call him Alexander Luthor Jr. even when throughout it, and it's closer to the, I want to say Earth 1 Superman is what people are parallel. They take a lot of panels and they put it next to the BVS film and kind of talk about how no, he's comic accurate to a portrayal of the character. Mm-hmm. And that's and he did a great Lex Luthor. I think you mentioned that it's I don't know, I feel like it is a more modern interpretation of what today's businessman would be. And like you mentioned, his dad would be a more classical, maybe 80s, 70s type of businessman, even 60s. Mm-hmm. And that's not obviously what he was going for in this film, and it worked as a modern interpretation of what would a billionaire tycoon today look like.
Yeah, my initial reaction to him was kind of like, like I didn't kind of like similar to Superman's, in that in Man of Steel, like I wasn't like immediately like the biggest fan of that interpretation, not because of the writing, not because of the acting, but because of how they modernized Superman and how much it showed, I feel like, how the world had changed in a negative way since the golden years, the golden age of Superman. And this new Luthor was kind of like, okay, well, they modernized him in a similar way. Like you said, like what would today's look, if Luthor was brand new today, how would he be in this environment that we're all this social media environment, this technological environment we're in now, versus like the classical Luthor. Same thing with the classical Superman. Like, you want him updated because you didn't like the old one wasn't selling tickets. Well, this is what you get, one that reflects the current times. And that's once I got over that, and like I wasn't evaluating him the same way as I was Superman. Like, okay, now I kind of get it.
Especially as people dissect the character more and more and see his plan sprawled out in the movie, and you watch it all unfold, and it works perfectly with getting Batman against Superman, with the destruction of that we saw in Man of Steel, that criticism being used in BVS as a plot point. It just plays so well in that film, and I do hope we do get more from Jesse as Lex. I'm glad he's open to the idea. Zack had revealed that in his original plan for Zack Snyder's Justice League 3, or I guess back then it was just called Justice League 3, we would have seen Lex betray Darkseid and be the catalyst to the downfall, or at least the start of it, as far as saving Earth. And I don't know if he's going to retain that in the future films, but it sounds like he still had plans for the character in the couple of sequels, aside from just, hey, I'm going to tell Deathstroke who Batman is so that it sets up the Batfleck film.
Mm-hmm.
Other DC movies are getting delayed, as a new report confirmed that the upcoming Shazam! Fury of the Gods and Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom will be delaying their release dates once again in order to spread out the costs associated with marketing and distribution. So the Shazam sequel was originally scheduled to open on December 21st of this year, is now pushed to March 17th of 2023, which Sandberg has said it's still earlier than the original release date when they first announced Shazam 2. The Aquaman sequel was originally scheduled for March. That March date is now pushed to the opening of December 25th, Christmas Day of next year. So that was the big headline, though, is that Emmerich left the company in such shambles that there is no money right now to justify marketing anything outside of Black Adam, and I forgot what the other big release for Warner Brothers is this year, but they want to spread out that cost of marketing to different quarters.
They're afraid of the Avatar sequel, that a sequel to a movie that no one can quote.
I do think Avatar 2 is going to do huge numbers, though, to be honest.
I think it will, sadly, just because, I'm still at a, dumbfounded how Avatar is still like the high benchmark of box office that people are trying to reach. It's like it did well overseas, and it's still visually stunning.
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't tell you anything else about it, and I will probably see the new one, but I definitely I can almost guarantee I won't be seeing it in the theaters. I might, just because James Cameron seems to be the only one who knows what really to do with 3D movies. But I'm sad that these movies, I really was looking, it's not the first time these movies have been delayed because of schedule shuffling. Will it make them better? I don't know. But Shazam in particular, I was really looking forward to.
So I haven't gotten your take on this since you were last on, because a lot has changed since then, and probably will change over the next, by the time this episode releases, I'm sure there'll be a huge headline that we won't get to report until next week. But Zaslav did say that Shazam and Aquaman, that he's seen them, that he likes them, but that he feels they can be better. So aside from the cost of marketing and releases, and aside from Avatar 2, do you subscribe to the idea that the scoopers are saying right now of they're trying to retroactively input? So, for example, Ben Affleck being back in Aquaman 2 and replacing Michael Keaton, that they're trying to fit these into that 10-year plan of the rumored Snyderverse is coming back.
But I've also heard that, the same rumors of they're pushing the theatrically released Justice League as the official version.
Right.
That they're trying to ignore the Snyder cut. And so I really don't know where Zaslav comes down on it. I feel it would seem that with Affleck being on set and being put into more scenes, and Aquaman replacing the bits with Michael Keaton, that, at first hand, this was basically because of the scheduling shift and Flash being pushed back, that Michael Keaton's Batman there wouldn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I just don't know where he stands. And that's what kind of is exhausting on it. Will I see these movies when they come out? Yeah. I'm invested in them. I want a lot of the talent in there. I hate that, Hamada is attached to him.
Yeah. And Jeff Johns, I think.
Yeah, but I'm invested in these characters, and for the most part, I like Momoa's interpretation of Arthur. I love that we're going to get even more Ben Affleck as Batman when we thought we weren't going to get to. We keep getting more. The director of the Flash movie, I liked his version of it, so I'm very interested to see what he brings to it. And Shazam, I love the original movie because of the playing with the themes and the different interpretation of what a family is based around like adoption, foster care. My parents were big into foster care when I was a kid growing up. My sister's adopted. So a lot of like that family stuff in there, like that different type of family kind of like really resonated with me. And so the longer I'm forced to wait for Shazam, it kind of hurts a little bit because, well, my sister lives on the other side of the country. And when I watch Shazam, I feel a little bit closer to her because it's the rare positive take on an adoptive family. Usually it's not played for a joke like you typically see, or tragedy.
Right.
And I just want to know where Zaslav like is falling down on this. Like it seems like on one move, it seems like he's positioning it for this 10-year plan of like reintroducing the Snyderverse, but it also seems like, okay, we're just really trying to make the best possible product and we're going to move forward in a forgetting the Justice League kind of world.
That's my biggest issue. And I want to circle back to this, but since we mentioned Ben, so in an interview with Access, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom star Momoa teased that we could see more Batman than we expected in the upcoming sequel. He said, quote, "I love Ben. I love him deeply. And yeah, fuck it. Ben's coming back. We have a lot of surprises," end quote. So it sounds like there'll be more Ben than just Aquaman 2. It sounds like they're going to reveal something. A lot of people are saying that confirms the Batfleck movie. But here's my biggest problem with it. And you mentioned that there's that possibility of them acknowledging that Justice League is canon, that they're moving forward. The latest report shows that Henry Cavill apparently filmed the scene for Black Adam back in August, and that he's wearing the red and blue suit. So not the black and silver. And that's my biggest problem. So people are saying they're bringing back Henry Cavill, so Superman's coming back. It's like, okay, who cares? Until Zack signs a contract with Warner Brothers again to make more DC films, I'm personally not going to give money to Black Adam thinking that that's going to be the one that confirms that the Snyderverse is restored. I'm not going to give money to Shazam or Aquaman 2 because Ben's back. Okay, great. So what does that mean though? It doesn't mean anything. RT Snyder Cut retweeted earlier today. They tweeted earlier that these movies don't have Zack's imprint on it. They don't feel like Zack's movies. They don't feel like they're in that same universe. So until, like you mentioned, Zaslav takes a stand on this, or the future DC president takes a stance on this, and we get the supposed October reveal in a few months, we're supposed to know what the 10-year plan is and what direction they're going in with the DC universe. Until that happens, I'm sorry, I'm going to vote with my dollar and still not give money to Hamadaverse projects.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't yuck someone else's yum. And if you want to vote for your dollar with your dollar, that's the best way to make something happen or to not happen, by not giving it your dollar. And as far as like, super like Henry Cavill showing up, supposedly like he was supposed to show up at the end. They originally planned him to show up at the end of Shazam, and they couldn't strike a deal.
Mm-hmm.
Either it was like money or they weren't moving forward with another Man of Steel movie. So if he did in fact film a scene in the red, whether it's the red and blue suit or the black and the black and silver suit, it's not really it. If he's not in the black and silver suit, it doesn't mean that the Snyder Cut is disavowed. It's ignored, like just like in the comics. Like it's an off scene thing where he goes back to the red and blue suit. It's like you don't have to necessarily show that in the scene for Black Adam, but if he is in there, that means he was either given his ask, he was given his quote to appear in that one scene, or they sign him contractually, like they're going to announce another Man of Steel movie or a sequel to Man of Steel with Henry Cavill, which hopefully if they do that, it's got Snyder's input. I need things to like settle down. I know right now it's a very chaotic period, and I don't think things are going to settle down anytime soon. It's going to be I think this just started happening. We knew things were going to shake up. And I feel like at least until the movies, I think for the rest of this year, there's going to be a lot of upheaval, a lot more shakeups. Like hold on to your butts. It's not going to settle down anytime soon. I think the picture will be a whole lot clearer by the end of the year. But for now, like just, every day, just watch for new Warner Brothers news and don't get disappointed that you just expect whatever you hold precious to be canceled. That way you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Well, and what frustrates me too is, well, one, the black and silver suit, Zach said that Superman does not return to the red and blue until he's influenced by the anti-life equation, until he comes on the dark side. And that's when he changes into the red and blue suit. That's why it's like, okay, if he does show up in Black Adam, I mean, maybe he's under the influence, and that's how they could write it off that way. But otherwise, to me, it tells me that they're going with Justice League canon. But where I get frustrated is where some of these people in the movement are telling people like me, hey, you need to stop boycotting, because now Zaslav is doing a 10-year plan in the Snyderverse's favor, and by you boycotting it, you're now hurting that same plan. And it's like, until he makes that clear, though, I don't feel comfortable giving, because I've been fooled before.
Yeah.
You know, how many times
Well, I mean,
have we been fooled?
it's not the first time that leadership in Warner Brothers has said that we've got a 10-year plan. We've got a 10-year plan. This is probably like the 10th 10-year plan we've heard about in the last 5 years.
We'll learn more in October, supposedly, and the latest I'm hearing is that Man of Steel 2 will be announced in October, but they won't announce Zach's attachment to it until next year. And that's when he's supposed to sign a contract in 2023. But again, until that happens, if that happens, I'm sticking to stay in my course, I guess.
Well, these actors aren't getting any younger. We're coming up on 10 years since BVS came out.
Yeah, but if he films Justice League 2 and 3, he'll do them back to back, and we'll be done with it. If Michael Keaton's not too old to play Batman, these actors will be fine. Last news story here, just broke, is that Dan Lin, the executive turned producer who did stuff like the live action Aladdin, the Lego movie, and the It horror franchise, is in talks to take the role of DC Comics chief, according to multiple sources that went out and reached to The Hollywood Reporter. So this role encompasses not just overseeing the films, but television as well. And Lin is reporting directly to Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav, again, according to insiders at Warner Brothers. Walter Hamada, the current head of DC Films, would transition out of the role. A Warner insider says that no negotiations are taking place and no official offer has been made, although other sources say the talks are discussing currently salary, reporting structure, the future of Lin's production company called Rideback. So kind of surprising, because people were expecting, names got thrown around like Debbie Snyder or Greg Berlanti, and instead we got Dan Lin, who is actually a friend of Alan Horn's, which now tracks because he's back at Warner Brothers Discovery.
I mean, that's kind of like a mixed bag of like movies there. I did like It. Aladdin, no one's as big a fan of, but like as I recall, like it did big box office. I could be wrong on that one. I wasn't paying attention to it, but I mean, that's the one thing that they've been lacking over Warner Brothers is a cohesive vision of this person. Like maybe someone come out of left field will bring like the kind of focus and outsider's perspective that, you know, seeing something that most people aren't seeing, that like maybe that 10-year plan was part of his pitch to get a job. And Zaslav, said, yes, it's his 10-year plan. This is the plan we're going with. And, they're just, at this point, like you said, just hashing out the ones and zeros.
Maybe by the time this episode releases, we'll get a solid name on who is actually going to be head of this. And the structure is, as you mentioned, they are taking a more similar, probably the closest approach they've had since to the MCU structure. And it is separate structures of, okay, DC Films is its own line of these people are reporting all to David Zaslav, but that's just that. It's not like it was before where Emmerich also oversaw DC and Warner Brothers Pictures and HBO Max at the end there.
too many chefs in the kitchen. Like I honestly couldn't tell you. Like I know that they've tried several times having a creative vision over DC Films, and it seemed like there was like a lot of too many chefs in the kitchen there, and they need that Kevin Feige, that person who only answers to the very top of the company, and we'll like him or hate him. It's worked for Marvel, and they just need someone who has the president of the company like believing in their vision.
And that's the crazy thing. As we know now, they hit the panic button on Zach's plan of, holy shit, it's making a lot of money, but reviewers and bloggers, and that's when they're like, we need to change things and course correct. and all of that stuff happened. And what's since you do seem to be a fan of the idea of they need a Kevin Feige, and I've heard you say that before on the show. What are your thoughts on people that immediately reacted to this with, no, they need to just do their own thing, separate from Marvel, stop trying to copy Marvel, stop trying to do your own projects, do your own hits, and I've got my response for that too, but I'm curious to see what you think since you're a champion of the Kevin Feige method.
I am and I'm not. I think I've said before that the film universes of both these respective comic book companies kind of like very closely kind of like mirror the comic companies themselves, in that Marvel is a big proponent of a house style. Like you have your family of books, like your Spider-Man family of books, your X-Men family of books, your Avengers family, and they all have kind of like a cohesive style. They took and feel like they're kind of interconnected very well, very smoothly. Whether you like the comics or not, they're consistent within each family. When they went to films and TV, it's a very consistent style. Every once in a while, like a new style, a new thing does get added to the mix that does kind of change things a little bit, but it still has like the same overall blueprint, the same overall feel. With the DC universe, there was a lot more like artistic expression. Like things were allowed to be like your Batman books. Like you could have 4 different Batman books. They all had like a distinctive flavor, to them. Like they didn't necessarily have to all look like they were similar artists. Each one was allowed to be its own thing. But at the end of the day, they still, like storyline wise, they kind of, work together. And they didn't necessarily look all the same in like a team book. So when you had like Batman showing up in like JLA, it wasn't necessarily the same look. Like, my favorite period of Justice League was, the Grant Morrison, Howard Porter days, where like you didn't have, like, they were kind of like reflecting things that were going on in the individual characters' books, but like they had its own style. It didn't necessarily have to, reflect what was going on in those books. If it didn't, there was something that didn't quite mesh, they would, just ignore it or, write it off as like, multiverse. There's a ways to get around it. And Marvel is now taking like that whole multiverse away from DC. It's like DC's had it more in the TV universe, but you could still have like each book or each movie have its own distinctive feel. And then when you have your team up movie, okay, you resolve your differences in like a bit of dialogue, or, it doesn't have to look like the other things. Like that's why I think everything you can have a Paul Levitz, who was a longtime publisher and editor in chief over at DC, and he oversaw all that. He encouraged people to be artistically diverse and had different lines. Like you had your Vertigo line that was even more diverse and you could be more experimental. But when it came time to have like a big, storyline, brought everything together, like in that storyline, things were kind of like gelled together. I think now with everyone who kind of grew up with that in the 80s, in the 90s, that is your audience. That's your ticket buying audience now. So I think you have an audience that is educated on, okay, things can be different and still be the same storyline and feed into each other. Marvel can have its own house style. DC or Warner Brothers can have their movies look different and feel different. And then when you have, something that brings one character in there, you resolve it through a piece of dialogue, or you double down on the experimentality of it, and you have the characters look different. Like they're literally crossing from one movie to another. And there's a million different ways. There's an infinite number of possibilities that they could do. But at the end of the day, you have your publisher, you have your editor in chief that oversees that all, just to make sure that, hey, we can, connect these things. Or like, hey, maybe this thing will be its own. Like it doesn't actually have to connect like a DC Black Label or a Vertigo.
But with this singular vision that if for this to work, they would have to hopefully not hit the panic button again with whomever's vision this is, and instead go, no, we're going to continue this. These are the planned films. We're not going to adjust midway through and have this different. I hope they fucking learn from their mistake. Whichever way this goes, my favor or not.
Well, that was the problem that you had with the Warner Brothers and DC films, is that when they decided to, they were done with Harry Potter movies and they realized they had all these comic book properties that they could adapt. They tried having people like they had Diane Nelson, they brought in Jeff Johns from the comics, and John Berg, and they had too many people who had their own visions, and there was no cohesion, no one to bring them all together. So I don't mean like that Kevin Feige is an easy term to throw around just because like other people have tried it and it hasn't succeeded. You can't necessarily replicate, Kevin Feige at this point is kind of like, it's just, shorthand for, they need like a point person, someone to kind of like bring focus to what they're actually doing. And they don't also necessarily have to mesh with one another, but they all kind of have to play along and not step on each other's toes, like encourage experimentation, but in the sphere of like, we do have to have a little bit of cohesiveness.
And I hope they've reached that. Here's my take on it, because so far the whole plan of they need to not copy Marvel. They need to, and I'm not saying copy Marvel as in they need to make comedies now, because they've been doing that. These are MCU films, but they haven't worked. Like this whole thing of just try to do something, try to do your own thing, and each person can make their own film. The box office has suffered big time because of it, and they're not bringing forward these popular characters or these epic stories, bringing in the Justice League to fight off a Darkseid invasion. Instead, we're getting some of these street level stories like the Birds of Prey and the Suicide Squad and all these weird little offshoots that it's like, this isn't going to be the Guardians of the Galaxy just because you have the guy from Guardians of the Galaxy. You're not going to replicate that success based on that alone. It's just, it's not working.
I do like what Zaslav has said that why aren't we capitalizing on Superman,
right?
Aquaman, Batman, Wonder Woman. Why don't we have more, output with these characters and with these visions? And it's because, you can't, Superman's routinely, like, I don't know that if there's any other character, maybe Spider-Man, who has had more starts and stops to films that were in production or about to be in production, that had more money wasted on development. Like, cause you have so many people that have their distinct vision of like what Superman is and what this movie needs to be. And they can't come to an agreement on it. So it just ends up going fallow and the Justice League is reduced to cameos at the end of Peacemaker or Shazam.
Right. And then they get joked on at the expense of the character's IP. Aquaman apparently being a fish fucker and all this other stuff. And I hope that Zaslav, when he said IP protection, I hope that's the kind of shit that he shuts down, because we worked hard to make Aquaman again a super cool character, and then now reduced to the jokes again of Aquaman. And I don't know. I hope he's serious when it comes to, like you mentioned, we need to capitalize on the characters that are going to make us money, and we need to protect these brands because they bought up these IPs and they need to make sure that they don't go by the wayside over, you want to write that line about whatever, Batman. I don't know what, there was something about Batman and Superman as well, from what I heard, that it's like, no, that's not going to fly here. We're trying to build up these properties.
Yeah.
But a lot will be happening, of course, in the next couple of weeks leading up to October. But that is our round of news this week. A lot of stuff happened this week, and I'm glad you were on for it. And we've got the last portion of this week's episode. It is the Brokehead Block, what Matt and I have been doing since you last heard us. So Matt, on your end, please update us on what's been going on in your life, at work, what you've been reading, watching, what's been going on.
I feel like I'm in the training program that never ends with my job. Like I'm still enjoying it, but like, yes, I'm still in training. We're supposed to finally be done with training, I think, in another week or two.
Put me in, coach.
Yeah, it's going well. Like, I can't complain about working from home. It's just like, but part of this training is, constantly being in like Skype calls with the rest of your training group. It's really distracting, having people talk over the phone, in your ear, because you got to be on. I got to be on camera during training. I got to have a headset on. So like, I'm trying to do work, and I'm moving a little bit more deliberately. Like, this is definitely different than what I've been doing for the last 16 years. And when someone's talking in my ear, it gets really distracting. But I have to listen. I can't just take off my headset, because like maybe they're asking a question that will help me with another task that I have later, or when I have a question, there's two other people who have questions they're asking. So it slows things down when like I'm ask a question that I want to have a question that might only take a couple of minutes, and I'm waiting 45 minutes to get my question in. But I got a raise recently, so like I guess I'm doing all right. Outside of that, like my wife and I just finished watching Sandman.
How is it
on Netflix? And it's gorgeous. It's a fucking beautiful series. The first two and a half episodes are a little bit slow to get through if you haven't watched it, or people are kind of on the fence whether they're going to give it a shot or not. I really encourage you to just kind of like stick through the first couple of episodes. There is a lot of exposition, but it gets moving. It's not action packed. Don't expect something action packed, but it seems like it's like this is the vision that Neil Gaiman has like championed and like campaigned for a long time. I read recently about how like he leaked an old version of a version of a script that was trying to be adapted into film like back in the late 90s. Just he purposely leaked it just to kind of like scuttle that version. And this definitely deserves your attention, and I hope they get more. Tom Sturridge, who plays Morpheus, his voice can be a little weird sometimes, like just because he's so stoic, but there's some interesting scenes going on there, and I like a lot of the talent that's on it. And it's Neil Gaiman. Like Neil Gaiman doesn't do crap. He might do something that's a little dense, a little hard to get into, but it's definitely worth the wait. And I hope that Sandman gets another season, and that they definitely pour the money into a second season. They don't do me like they did with Altered Carbon, where the first season they sunk all the money into, and the second season they sank like less than half the money into, and led to a swift cancellation after that second season. But what else?
Well, real quick with Sandman.
Halloween's. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. And Nick was talking about how he wanted to discuss it with me on his show, and I just hadn't seen it, and the books didn't really grab me. And I know what you're saying with how dense they are, but for me, it even though I wasn't immediately running out to get volume 2, it's dense in a good way, not in a Grant Morrison way. And I don't know,
yeah.
If that makes any sense. So it's something that you can actually, at least that I could actually grasp if I put a little bit of effort into. Whereas, I'm doing heavy research into a Grant Morrison story just to try to get the different symbolisms and implications that he had while he was having his visions as he dropped acid while writing the thing. But yeah, with you and Nick now talking about the Sandman, I think I might finally give that a shot. And yeah, I heard that the first episode is a very slow burn, but if you're saying by episode 3, it kind of picks up its pace a little bit.
It starts picking up a little bit. Not so much like, I wouldn't say so much the pace, because each episode is very deliberate. There's nothing that I would say is like super fast paced, but they introduce more characters. Like the first two, or they introduce more characters are going to be sticking around for a while. Like the first episode is very exposition heavy, and I never read the entire Sandman like line or like run the entire series. My sister read it, and she's still working her way through the series, which I was shocked that I watched this before her. But I read the first book or two, and it's definitely like, I'd say it's very, very, very faithful to the books overall. But it also had kind of like an exposition heavy first like arc, but like it's deliberate. It seems faithful, and I think it's gonna play even better on like repeated viewings, because there are themes and characters that like Gaiman pulls from everywhere. He pulls from like all different religions, a lot of different fantasy, myth, like all of it's fair game, and it's something that I think is going to be more rewarding the more you watch it.
I thought for a minute there you were going to confirm Martian Manhunter does in fact make an appearance in this.
No. He does. It does not. But like they do get some DC like Wonder Woman and Superman, Batman toys pop up in the background of a couple of modern day scenes.
Interesting. So it's canon that the comics are just a thing, kind of like in Supergirl. I think they did something similar. Not
necessarily. At least the toys are, and like, but they've also done that in the actual comics, where there are Superman comics in the DC universe. So it's like, it doesn't say that those characters, like those people, aren't real in this universe. It's like, it's not touching those corners. But you do have Hector and Lita Hall in there, and Hector Hall is the son of Hawkman.
So a little bit of that touched on the series. Yeah, I guess I'll check it out eventually. Right now I'm working through Spawn, the HBO show, because I wasn't allowed to watch it as a kid, and now I'm like, let me check this out. And it's definitely a product of its time, but I'll get to Sandman next, especially since it has had such a journey in getting produced. At one point, Joseph Gordon-Levitt was going to star in that film. And like you mentioned, Neil Gaiman seems very happy about this. He's begging for a season 2. He's saying chances are better now than they were last week, especially after the viewings seem to have doubled over week 1. So it sounds like we may get more. I
would have been down for a Joseph Gordon-Levitt movie, but I'm glad that it went to a series, because I think they would have had to have compressed way too much for a movie. Like, it would not have played well as a movie, I don't think. And then I feel like if they keep this kind of budget for the second season, like, then they've got something special on their hands. But other than that, like, it's kind of like a fun, like, fantasy lead into like the spooky season.
Perfect. What you were mentioning before I interrupted, Halloween Horror Nights, you're getting ready for that?
Yeah. Next Friday. When this drops on Sunday, so in just a few days, like, Halloween Horror Nights time is upon us again. Howl-O-Scream over at SeaWorld. So it's fun. Like, this year's Halloween Horror Nights, a lot of longtime people aren't as excited about it. Really? I'm a little bit more excited because they usually have like an even, like, half and half split between like houses that are adapted from existing IPs, and then half that their own creatives come up, like, concepts that they come up with. And this year, it's more heavily favoring like the original concepts or long held Universal concepts. Like, you've got another Monsters House where it's like Dracula versus the Mummy and Wolfman, and then you've got the classic, like the Michael Myers Halloween 1 house they're gonna do. But like, the more original stuff is what I'm really looking forward to, the stuff that they created in house. And it looks like they're doing, like, because this is Halloween Horror Nights 31, they're all reflecting like October 31st and a much more like classic Halloween vibe, just traditional themes. And a lot of the houses and like, or the stands are out there and the merch is out there right now, does feel very kind of like I could have seen this stuff when I was like trick or treating when I was a kid. So I'm really looking forward to it. My wife and I were originally, trying to save some money. We were just going to do opening night this year with the express passes, and we kind of caved today, and we got the Rush of Fear pass. So we're going to be there all throughout September.
I'm looking forward to all the pictures you share. Kind of interesting that, because Halloween Horror Nights is a pretty big deal for Florida residents, at least in our area here. Universal Studios, to anyone that's not familiar with what Halloween Horror Nights are, but it's basically Universal celebration of Halloween. They change up the park a little bit. They open up certain areas to just have these special events and haunted houses, drinks and food special for the event. And yeah, a lot of locals go to it. It's definitely big for locals, especially.
It's huge internationally too. And like last year, with the pandemic 2 years ago, which would have been the 30th anniversary, they were only able to open a couple houses during the day. There was a lot of plexiglass, a lot of plastic sheeting. They didn't have their full event, for what would have been the 30th anniversary. The 30th anniversary ended up getting pushed to last year, and they had their close to full thing, but you still had, it was all local people within the country, because a lot of international travel still hadn't opened back up. And probably the second biggest market that comes to that is from the UK, and the UK could not come to Florida last year at this time. But now you're going to have a lot more, all that international travel to open back up. So it's going to be bananas.
As I learned the term, they call it revengecation, is what Julian, one of the hosts on here, told me. Well, then I have to look that one up, and I'm like, oh, okay, now I know what that is. And we're still in the middle of that here in Florida, especially actually throughout the country. Everyone's visiting everywhere, flying. It's
gonna be a good. It's gonna be a good 2 or 3 more years, I think, before that levels out. Like, especially if like we don't hit as bad a recession as economists were thinking we were gonna hit, because like, technically we're in a recession, but it really hasn't shown the signs of it just yet. So the longer that this fake there, this kind of false recession keeps going on, like we're either going to have like a hard economic drop in a year or so, or people are just going to keep doing the same stuff and just spending wantonly. And like I feel like there's going to be another year or two of this before things really start to slow down.
That's one of the things that Bobby, Scott, and I are going to go to Epcot, and this is the first time I've been in I think a few years, maybe since the pandemic. Maybe I went to Epcot once, but Bobby's like, "Oh, we got to put in park reservations," and I'm like, "What? What are park reservations? What are you talking about?" He's like, "No, there's now a cap on how many people can attend the park due to the amount of people traveling and also the lack of workers that some of these parks still have. So they put a cap on people, and so we need to reserve just to be able to go to the parks." And I'm like, holy, like to me, I'm like, this is unheard of.
It's one of the reasons my wife and I gave up our Disney passes, because even pre-pandemic, like I always felt like we had to have like an objective in mind. Like it was hard to just casually go to the parks. Like if I went to just like casually hang out at one, it would have been either Epcot or Hollywood Studios. But now it's like you've got to have a reservation. Whatever the newest ride is, like you either have to like get up early to reserve, get in the queue before the park even opens, or you have to be in the park and like on your phone at a specific time to try to get an afternoon slot. There's no fast passes included now it's called the Lightning Lane. They have to pay. Like you could, if you wanted to get like a Lightning Lane pass, say for like one of the Star Wars rides, you're paying like $17 extra just to get in that express queue.
And people are paying it.
And like people are paying it. And what's crazy is, so like we did kind of like a farewell to like all the parks until like I'm sure we'll have annual passes at some point again in the future, but we're definitely giving it a break. But like the last park we went to before our passes expired was Hollywood Studios. We went to the Star Wars area. We went to Rise of Resistance, and we saw people going the Lightning Lane, and the standby line was saying like 80 minutes. We were out of that ride in 40 minutes tops. And so like now they're like, it seems like that they're inflating, wait times are always estimations. They're not always exact, but like that's a huge difference between what that time was, the expected wait time. And I can't imagine that people who had money saw that and was like, oh, I'm not waiting in that. I'm paying $17 like, to get out of there, in 20 minutes. And like, well, you paid $70 not to, you only had to wait like 20 more minutes and you'd still be off that ride. How much time did you actually save? You paid $1 per minute that you saved.
Yeah.
The thing with that reservation system too that Disney found was like, it's not so much the employee thing, because a lot of that staffing issue was like, it's not as bad as it used to be when they reopened the parks. But what they found out was like, if they cap how many reservations they can have in each park, you'd have people who would go to it would send people to the lesser visited parks. So it would up those attendance numbers there. Mm-hmm. And then they would have to, like, if they had a reservation, they had to check in at that park before they could go to like a park hop to one of the other parks. So even if the person's like end goal was go to Magic Kingdom and they saw the reservations were up, they still had to go to Epcot first before they could go over to Magic Kingdom after 2:00.
Yeah, that's something Bobby mentioned, that if you're trying to do the park hopper, you have to check in at that first park that you said you were going to before going to that second one.
It's too much fucking work to go to a park. You're supposed to go there to have fun. Like now you got to, make reservations just to like, before you even think about getting in your car.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm glad that Bobby and Scott are pros at that, because I wouldn't have fucking known. And now I know for when we do take Leo to Animal Kingdom, so we can go to the dinosaur ride and check out all the dinosaurs. And it's like, okay, well, we got to make our reservations and got to do the whole thing and figure all that stuff out. So yeah,
it's too much work. It's too much work to go to Disney now.
Yeah, not casual anymore like it used to be. When I used to be a cast member, it was great. Like, hey, we got a couple hours to kill. Let's go to Epcot. Let's go to Magic Kingdom, even the busiest fucking one. Could go there and go on Haunted Mansion and go home if we wanted to, but not the case. Very, very different these days.
What's new with you?
So I know for me, I finished a couple of books. I actually got some reading done. The Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, which all my coworkers were like, oh, just don't even read it. And I'm like, but Kelly already paid money for it. She bought it for me. Like, I have to read it. And they're like, it's terrible. Have you read The Cursed Child?
I have not, because it's the slimmest of the books, but like I just glancing through the pages, I saw that it's not so much a book as it is just like the script for the Broadway play. And so like, I want to see how I wouldn't mind seeing the play on Broadway. My wife's seen it and she enjoyed the play, but like, I want to see how it was originally presented, intended. I don't want to read like Cliff's notes of, or like an annotated version of of some other media you're supposed to consume it in.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, they were telling me it's like fan fiction, and I'm like, oh, come on. And I read it, and it is like fucking fan fiction, man. It was written by 2 other authors, and then J.K. Rowling, based on her ideas for what a future movie or book would be. So she got paid enough for it and approved it and said, yeah, this is what I would have done. And they wrote the dialogue. They did weird time churn. They broke the time, the way that the time churner works in the books, thrown that out the window, and now it works differently in this book. So that's one big thing that didn't work. The dialogue is like Snake, these characters wouldn't say that. And it's just a lot of weird stuff in there. So it's definitely like a fan fiction, very bizarre. I would not recommend it either. I hear the play is amazing because of the special effects and the spectacle, but that the story itself is awful. It's like a 2-day play that you have to come back the next day and watch the rest of it. I don't know if I'll go that route if it ever makes its way anywhere near me. But holy shit, yeah, they were right. If you have not bought The Cursed Child yet, I would recommend skipping out on it. If J.K. Rowling ever does a full book of it, and I don't think she will because of all the controversy that's going on with her and people not wanting to support her for rightful reasons, then. But if that ever happens and you don't care and you want to wait for that, then probably go that route. But I was not happy with that one. But I did start reading instead. I finished that and I'm started The Rise and Fall of Stan Lee. That's a novel that more or less corrects. It's an autobiography, but it corrects all of his statements that he said throughout the years. The author interviewed Larry, his brother, and a bunch of other people that worked with Stan and it's basically a book of getting the facts right. And what I like about it is it's not just calling out. I'm waiting to get to the Jack Kirby stuff. Like I want to know all the details behind that relationship, but it's going into like, look, this is the childhood he had. And this is probably why he embellished a lot on his childhood stuff, on why he avoided his Jewish upbringing a lot when he talked in interviews. And it's a fascinating read. Very, very good so far. I'm maybe 1/25 of the way through it, but it's a good fucking read so far.
What was the name of that again?
The Rise and Fall of Stan Lee. It's True Believers, The Rise and Fall of Stan Lee.
I'll have to look that up because like, I never felt like we were ever going to get like a balanced history of Stan Lee until he'd actually passed, because if there's anything that he was good at, it was like basically controlling his own narrative. Because like who would ever think something negative or there was something dark behind the scenes of someone who always seemed like he was always happy just to be like he always got to play in like the biggest sandbox ever.
Right, and it does go into a lot of like he is going to eventually touch on what went on behind the scenes with his daughter, especially, and the author did not have a good experience with his daughter, so there is some truth to some possible abuse that may have happened towards the later end of it. But he kind of alludes to, well, he also did a lot of abusing himself while working in the industry as far as the creators are involved, especially. He briefly talks about maybe some scandals as far as other women. And so I'm excited to really dive into this thing some more because it's some good stuff so far. And like you said, Larry, his brother, has cleared up a lot of these things in there, and it seems like the author really did his research and all the different people that he interviewed throughout this, and trying to interview his daughter too, and she was not having any of it. In fact, accused him of stealing her autobiography on Stan on what happened, and he was like, "That's not the case, but this is how she behaved." Pretty good stuff, but that's basically it, man. Work's been pretty smooth. But I've been able to get some reading done, which is really nice. Bobby, who's another host on here, just came back from Pokemon Worlds, and he judged the event. Fucking Pokemon. Cool. He was one of the judges there, and brought me back a Worlds hat. Has the London logo on it, and a backpack. So now I wear that hat at work, and it just sounds like he had a cool time, and I'm excited to have him back on so he can kind of give a deep dive on Pokemon Worlds. But otherwise, the boss is back, which is nice, and he's my friend as well, so it's good to have him back at work.
Awesome.
But outside of that, basically does it for the Broket block and the rest of the news this week. Matt, please, thank you once again for being on for this Warner Brothers Discovery heavy episode. A lot more to come, and please let them know where they can find you if they want to continue the conversation.
Facebook.com/Madner, or look for Matt Adner on Facebook, Instagram at Madner.com. Facebook's probably your best bet. Like I've been doing less and less social media.
And you will find a link to this on the description of today's episode. If you do want to get in contact with other members of the Broket Corps, make sure to join our Discord lounge. On Discord, you can mute it, you can snooze it, and then just pop in anytime you want. But we do have a link to that in our description of the show notes as well. But it's a good way to get in contact with not just other Broket Corps members, but also members on the show that also help host the show for you every single week. So that's once again on Discord. But thank you once again for joining us for sector number 523. I've been Daniel, joined by Matt, and Broket Corps, all will be well. So I've got to ask, with Halloween Horror Nights, is there a house that they have not done yet that you would like to see based on an IP, or one that they should bring back that you enjoyed in the past?
My experience with Halloween Horror Nights hasn't been like the longest, because like even when I first moved to Florida, I was an event like that I didn't have time or the money to go to. I finally got some access in there when I did work at Universal for a bit, but they had, for I think it was the 2018 event, a scare zone called Vamp 1985, which was an update of one they had a couple of years before, which was like Vamp 1955. And like in that scare zone, they had kind of like, it was like the original concept. It was kind of like a 1950s doo-wop greaser kind of like vamps, and you'd have like vampires like dance around the scare zone chasing after people, and that was fun. But like the 85 one I loved even more, because like you had kind of like vampire versions of like a big 80s celebrities. Like there was like a vampire Don Johnson, like Sonny, in full Miami Vice, like white suit, turquoise shirt, like going around. There was a Michael Jackson. There was Axl Rose. Around, like, there were a lot of like celebrities and like people screaming and running. Like they always have like plants, in the crowd. That was like a super fun scare, and they had a great playlist. And like the concept was, it was like New Year's Eve, 1984. So they're playing like all like hits that were in the 80s of bigger hits of 84, and then it was like they had like a ball drop every hour down to like it's 1985, and a couple of dance numbers. That was super fun scare zone, which was like a kind of like fun counterpoint to like the scare zone in that same area the year before was based on like the Purge movies, and that was like great. So they had,
that's creepy.
yeah, super creepy. So I would love like to see like either one of those, or like the scare zones like come back. They kind of like they've been leaning into the classic monsters the last couple of events, and this is going to be like the third event in a row. They've had a house that's based off of the classic Universal monsters like Dracula, Frankenstein, Mummy, Wolfman, Creature of the Black Lagoon. And they had, so like a few years ago, it was all of them kind of like one house, and it was cool seeing like updated, like still like the original design, but modern makeup. And then last year they had The Bride of Frankenstein Lives, which a lot of people forget, and even I forgot, that in the Bride of Frankenstein movie, the actual bride wasn't in the movie, and didn't like appear in the movie until like the last 10 minutes of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so this house was kind of like, if we made a sequel to that movie. And so the concept was, the bride, or the Castle Frankenstein drops on the monster, and that's like the end of the movie. This is like, well, the bride survived, like dug out the monster and spent like the next decade. So like you're actually like the movie, or like the house starts off like right at the end of that movie, and by the end of the house, you've gone through like 20, 30 years of story where she's been experimenting all this time, like finding the other monsters, like taking off parts of them to try to like bring Frankenstein back and, get her man back, so to speak, where she had the control of everything and she had all the knowledge of like of Dr. Frankenstein. And so it was kind of like, I wanted to see this as like an actual like movie, but make it old school. And so now this year they've got Mummy, like Dracula versus Mummy versus Wolfman. And so, it's like, it's technically, like an adapted, IP, but they're doing like an original story for it. And like a lot of like that stuff, like my dad hasn't been in the greatest health for like the last couple of years. And when they do this stuff, it kind of like, I feel closer to them because, I grew up watching like the classic monster movies and like Saturday night, just us on the living room floor in front of like an old cathode tube, like having snacks and watching these old monster movies. So like the more that they bring that in, like the more like a close feel of my dad. Like I wish he could come see these, but I don't. But he probably will never see these houses. So anytime they bring something that's like classic monsters, like I'm all for it. I really look forward to seeing what like their original concepts are. Like the Vamp 85 was a good one. I think they really get to let loose on the stuff that they get to create in house.
What a heartfelt answer, man. I'll leave that one there.